Alright, welcome back to Everyday Race. Today I'm going to check my valve clearances and then I'm going to adjust them to spec. So for that, you're going to need an engine. You're going to need some shims. I bought some hot cams kit worth every penny. You're going to need a micrometer, some basic tools, and you're going to need a filler gauge. I've already pulled all the ones that I'm going to use. I've got them from 0.076 millimeter all the way to 0.279 millimeter. So you're also going to need a paper and a pen. So I already marked my cylinders since I'm going to be working from this side of the engine. This is a number 1 cylinder, 2, 3, 4. This is the intake side and this is the exhaust side. You can look up the specs in any service manual for your motorcycle, but I already looked mine up. On the exhaust, it's supposed to be from 0.17 to 0.22 millimeters, and on the intake it'll be from 0.15 to 0.24 millimeters, depending on the engine you're working on. Those clearances could be different. So I've got them written down, and I'm gonna remove the valve cover. You've got, this is 4 valves per cylinder engine, so there's going to be 4 valves on number 1 cylinder, 4 valves on the exhaust. Same thing for the other ones. You've got 2 on the intake and 2 on the exhaust. So obviously, after you get all these done, you're going to get some gloves so you can feel like a doctor working on the engine. So put those on and get ready to do a surgery on this engine. Alright, so I've already removed the ignition coils, and I've already removed the spark plugs, which you don't have to remove, but it makes it a lot easier to spin the engine without the spark plugs. And since you got to do a valve adjustment approximately every 15,000 miles, it's a good idea to replace the spark plugs while you're doing the valve job. So next step is, obviously, you're going to need to remove the valve cover. This valve cover was held with 6 bolts that I've already removed. So get this out of the way. Alright, next I removed the timing cover. That way I can get to the crankshaft bolt, and so I can see the timing marks. I've already set these. I've already set this engine to top dead center. What that means is that there's a mark. It's supposed to point at a certain spot on this engine. It's supposed to point at the case, where the case is split from upper to lower. That's where the mark's supposed to point at. Mine's a little bit off. So I'm going to fix that. Gonna need some tools. Bam. Looks like it's a 17 millimeter. I really hate this ratchet. This is my favorite ratchet. So next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spin the engine. I'm gonna remove the valve cover gasket. I'm going to spin the engine until the mark on this timing wheel, on the trigger wheel, is going to be pointing at the split of the cases, and the intake mark on the intake camshaft is going to be flat at the surface of the cylinder head and pointing to the left. And the exhaust is going to do the exact opposite. It's going to point to the right. So let's spin this puppy up. Don't even think about it. Here we go, we're getting close. Alright, so let's line this mark up. Carefully watching. This is the exhaust mark. Perfect. Now the number one. Now the number 1 and number 4 cylinders are at the top dead center. So next I can start checking the valve clearances. Alright, so with the engine at top dead center, I'm going to start measuring the valve clearances. I'm going to start with cylinder 4. I'm going to start with the intake. I'll start with the smallest one. Nothing. So it's less than 0.102 millimeters on both intake valves on cylinder number 4. So I'm going to mark it 0.10, 0.10, less than 0.10. Next I'm going to move to the exhaust, and the reason I'm doing these cylinders is, as you can see, the lobe, the bigger part of the camshaft, is facing, it's not touching the bucket or a lifter. So I'm able to slide this in. This one's going in perfectly. So I'm going to step up to bigger one, 0.127. Okay. Let's start with the 0.15 is next. Alright, it's not going in this one. It's going in that one. So cylinder number 4 exhaust valve is going to be 0.127. 0.127, and next I'm going to try 0.178. It's going in, but nope, not going in. So this valve is going to be at 0.152 millimeter. So next I can check the exhaust on cylinder number 3. So the same thing, I'm going to start with the 0.102. It's going in. That was going in just fine. Step up to 0.127. Perfect. 0.152. Okay, so this one is at 0.152. Gets real tight. 152. And I think this valve, yeah, it's going to be 0.178 millimeters. 0.178. Now I'm going to measure clearance on cylinder number 2 on the intake side, since the cam lobe, as you can see, is pointing towards me. So I'm going to do the same thing, start with the 0.102. Now we got to do some basic math. So the proper clearance on the intake side is from 0.15 to 0.24 millimeter. I like to keep all my clearances the same for every cylinder, or try as much as possible, since the shims only come in 0.05 differences, like 0.17 to 1.75. There's so much you can do. You sort of just have to get it right between. So we can see this one was less than 0.102, and the clearance is supposed to be 0.15 to 0.24. So I'm going to leave this one alone. This one didn't give me a good reading, almost like the cam lobe was touching the bucket. But for example, this one 0.203 is right on the money. This one's right on the money. I don't have to touch the intake on the cylinder number 3 and 2. And this one's on the tight side, just this one. So if the clearance is too tight, you have to put a smaller shim. So if you put a smaller shim, I'm going to pull the shim out and I'm going to measure it with the micrometer. And for example, if the shim that's already in the engine is like 1.70, then I would have to put 1.65 millimeter in there. That will give me 0.05 more clearance. So what that's going to do, it's going to give me a clearance of 0.177, basically adding the number. So now let's move to the exhaust side. So cylinder number 4 was at 0.127, 0.152, so that's too tight and it's going to need adjustment. Cylinder number 3 is going to need adjustment. I really don't want to be that close to the, well, I guess I'll leave that one alone, but I will shim that one to 0.202. It's going to be right about perfect. This one's right on the money, and this valve is too tight, so I'm gonna put a smaller shim by 0.05 millimeters. So let's go ahead, it wasn't too bad. And on this one, I'm just gonna have to gamble. I'm gonna put 0.10 smaller shims on both sides. Then I have to install the camshaft, and then I'm going to have to remeasure them, and if they're still too tight, I'll have to pull the camshaft and continue doing it till I have proper clearances. So next step would be is to remove the camshafts. So for that, I like to put my engine at top dead center. When the intake mark faces points to the left, and the exhaust mark on the exhaust camshaft faces away from the intake camshaft. So I'm gonna have to spin the engine. That was pretty easy. Let's see. Now you can see the mark is pointing straight at the split, or you can just mark the teeth. For example, 1/3 teeth is facing that way. So that's pretty damn good. So once you have that, we can start removing the camshafts. For that, I'm going to use a 8mm tool to remove the tensioner. Timing chain tensioner's got to come out first. And this is a manual tensioner, so it's a little bit different than a factory one. Factory one, you'd have to remove the center nut, and then you have to pull the spring and the pin out, and then remove the two 8mm bolts. There she is. Now I can start removing the caps that hold the camshafts. I like to start with the center one.